10 minutes after my 5-year-old daughter called me giggling about the man in her closet, I opened that closet door and found a stranger who'd been living in my house for 3 weeks. And I realized every strange thing that had been happening wasn't my imagination. It was him. I'm Nina Westbrook. I'm 34 years old. I'm a nurse, and I'm a single mom to my daughter Harper. 3 months ago, my divorce was finalized, and Harper and I moved into a rental house in a quiet Portland suburb. It was supposed to be our fresh start, our safe space, our new beginning. But from the day we moved in, things felt off. Food disappeared. Cabinet doors I'd closed were open. I heard noises at night that I convinced myself were just the house settling. And Harper kept talking about the quiet man who watched her play. I thought she was processing the divorce through imagination. I thought I was being paranoid because I was living alone for the first time in 10 years. I dismissed every single warning sign until that midnight phone call when Harper giggled and said the man in her closet wanted to say hi. If you want to know how a stranger lived in my house for weeks without me knowing, and what I found when I finally opened that closet door, make sure you subscribe and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. It was late November, and Harper and I had been in our new house for almost 2 months. The divorce from my ex-husband Todd had been finalized in August, and by September we'd moved into this 3-bedroom craftsman house on a tree-lined street. It was perfect for us, or at least that's what I kept telling myself. Affordable rent, good school district, a backyard where Harper could play. Everything a single mom working 12-hour nursing shifts could hope for. The house was old, built sometime in the 1920s, with all those quirky features that come with age. Hardwood floors that creaked, built-in shelving with doors that didn't quite close right, a big attic with a pull-down ladder, deep closets with old-fashioned doors. Todd had helped us move in, and he'd commented that the place had character. I'd taken that as a compliment at the time. I worked 3 12-hour shifts a week at the hospital, which meant Harper went to daycare on those days and stayed with Todd every other weekend. We were still figuring out our new routine, still adjusting to being a family of 2 instead of 3. Some days were good. Some days Harper cried for her daddy, and I felt like the worst mother in the world for not being able to keep our family together. But I kept telling myself we'd be okay. We had to be okay. I was determined to make this work, to prove that I could handle single motherhood, to show Todd and everyone else that I was strong enough to do this alone. Looking back now, that determination to prove my strength is exactly what made me ignore all the signs that something was very, very wrong. From the first week, there were strange things. I'd buy groceries, and they'd disappear faster than made sense. I'd find the pantry door open in the morning, even though I distinctly remembered closing it the night before. Once, I found muddy footprints in the hallway that were way too big to be Harper's, but I convinced myself I must have tracked them in and forgotten. The house made noises at night, creaking sounds from upstairs, even though there was no second floor, just an attic. Footsteps that I told myself were just old pipes or the heating system kicking on. A few times I had this overwhelming feeling that someone was watching me, especially when I was in the kitchen late at night doing dishes after Harper went to bed. That prickling sensation on the back of your neck, you know? I'd turn around fast, expecting to see someone, but there was never anyone there. Just me being paranoid, I thought. Just me being anxious about living alone. My older sister Renee came over about 2 weeks after we moved in to help me hang some pictures. She walked through the house with this look on her face, and finally she said, "Nina, does this place feel weird to you? Like someone's here?" I'd laughed it off and told her she was being dramatic. Renee has always been into intuition and feelings and all that stuff I don't believe in. I'm the practical sister, the logical one, the nurse who believes in science and evidence, not vibes. But Harper kept saying things that bothered me. She'd tell me about the quiet man who lived in our house. She'd say someone moved her toys around while she was sleeping. She'd point at the ceiling and say she heard footsteps up there. Every time she said something like that, I'd give her the same explanation. That's just your imagination, sweetie. Sometimes when we're adjusting to new places, our brains make up stories. There's no man in the house. It's just you and me. Todd thought I was handling it wrong. He said I should shut down the imaginary friend talk immediately, that I was encouraging Harper to live in fantasy instead of reality. We fought about it more than once, but I'd read about this in my pediatric nursing rotation years ago. Kids create imaginary friends during stressful times. It's how they process big changes. The divorce had been hard on Harper, even though we'd tried to keep things amicable. Of course she was going to act out in some way. The imaginary friend phase would pass once she felt more secure, except it wasn't imaginary, and I was about to find that out in the most terrifying way possible. On this particular Tuesday night, I'd worked a brutal 12-hour shift at the hospital. I'd picked Harper up from Todd's place around 8 p.m. where she'd spent the previous night. We'd eaten a quick dinner of mac and cheese because I was too exhausted to cook anything else. I gave her a bath, read her 2 stories like I always did, and tucked her into bed by 9:30. Then I collapsed on the couch with a glass of wine, the TV playing some show I wasn't really watching. I was just trying to decompress, trying to let the stress of the day drain away. I must have dozed off sometime around 11, because the next thing I knew, my phone was ringing, and Harper's name was on the screen. My heart jumped into my throat. Harper never called this late. She was supposed to be asleep. Something had to be wrong. I answered immediately, my voice thick with sleep. "Harper, baby, what's wrong?" But Harper wasn't crying. She wasn't scared. She was giggling. "Mommy, the man in my closet wants to say hi." Everything inside me went cold. I sat up so fast I nearly dropped my phone, my heart suddenly pounding in my chest. "What? Harper, what man? There's no one in your closet, baby." My voice came out higher than normal, trying to sound calm, but failing completely. Harper turned the tablet around on the video call so I could see her closet door, and my stomach dropped. The door was open about 6 inches, just enough to show darkness inside, but nothing else. The video quality was grainy in the low light, just the glow from her nightlight, and the tablet screen illuminating her small room. "He's right there, Mommy. He's always here. He's very quiet, but he's nice. He told me his name, but I forgot it." Harper's voice was so casual, so matter-of-fact, like she was telling me about a new friend from daycare, but every word made my blood run colder. I was already standing, already moving toward the stairs. "Harper, listen to me very carefully. I need you to stay in your bed. Don't get out of bed. Don't go near the closet. Mommy is coming upstairs right now, okay?" My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the phone. This had to be her imagination. It had to be. There couldn't actually be someone in her closet. That was impossible. We lived in a safe neighborhood. The doors were locked. This was just Harper's ongoing imaginary friend story getting more elaborate. "Okay, Mommy, but you don't need to be scared. The man says he's sorry. He didn't mean to scare anyone." "Sorry? He says he's sorry?" The way Harper said it, like she was relaying a message from someone actually there, made my skin crawl. I climbed the stairs as fast as I could, my mind racing through every possible explanation. Maybe Harper had a very vivid dream and was still half asleep. Maybe she was playing an elaborate pretend game and had really committed to it. Maybe the shadows in her closet looked like a person, and her imagination filled in the rest. But then I heard it. A sound from inside Harper's room. A creak, not the normal settling of an old house. The specific sound of weight shifting on floorboards. Someone was in there. I pushed Harper's door open all the way, my whole body shaking with adrenaline and terror. Harper was sitting cross-legged on her bed, still holding the tablet, looking completely calm, like this was the most normal thing in the world. "Harper, come here right now," I said, my voice coming out sharp and scared. Harper climbed off her bed and walked to me, and I immediately pulled her behind me into the hallway, putting my body between her and whatever was in that room. "Show me where you saw the man." Harper pointed at her closet door without any hesitation. "In there. That's where he stays mostly. Sometimes he goes up in the ceiling, too. I hear him walking around up there at night." The ceiling. The attic. Oh God, how long had someone been in my house? I reached for my phone to dial 911, but before I could, I heard that creaking sound again, definitely coming from inside the closet, not my imagination, not the house settling, Someone was in there right now. Suddenly, everything clicked into place with horrible clarity. The missing food, the open cabinets, the footprints I'd found, the feeling of being watched, the sounds at night. None of it had been in my head. Someone had been living in my house. Someone had been here the whole time, watching us, hiding from us, and I'd dismissed every single sign because I was too stubborn to believe it could be real. Harper tugged on my pajama sleeve, and when I looked down at her, her face was so innocent and concerned. "Mommy, why are you shaking? The man said he didn't mean to scare us. He just doesn't have anywhere else to go. I've been sharing my snacks with him. He's really hungry." My daughter had been feeding whoever was hiding in our house. A 5-year-old child had been interacting with a stranger living in our home, and I'd been too busy dismissing her stories to protect her. "Harper, go to my bedroom right now and lock the door from inside. Take your tablet and call Aunt Renee. Tell her to come here right now. Go, baby. Run." Something in my voice must have finally scared her, because Harper ran down the hallway to my bedroom. I heard the door close and the lock click. I stood alone in the hallway, staring at that half-open closet door, every muscle in my body tense. I should run. I should grab Harper and get out of the house and call the police from outside. That's what any sane person would do. But I needed to see. I needed to know who had been violating our home, watching my daughter sleep, living in our space like some kind of ghost. I grabbed a baseball bat from the hall closet, Todd's old one that he'd left behind when he moved out. My hands were sweating so much I could barely grip it. I turned on the hallway light, flooding Harper's room with brightness. Then I walked slowly toward that closet, the bat raised, my heart hammering so hard I thought it might burst through my chest. I used the bat to push the closet door open wider. At first I saw nothing, just Harper's clothes hanging on the rod, her shoes scattered on the floor, storage boxes on the shelf above, normal closet things. Then something moved behind the hanging clothes. A shape, a shadow, a person. My breath caught in my throat, and I couldn't scream, couldn't move, couldn't do anything but stare. "Please don't scream," a man's voice said from inside the closet, quiet and raspy. "I'm not going to hurt you. I promise I'm not going to hurt you. I'm so sorry." I stumbled backward, nearly falling over Harper's toy bin, my heart racing so fast I thought I might pass out. The bat was still raised in my shaking hands, and I gripped it tighter even though I wasn't sure I'd actually be able to swing it if I needed to. "Get out of there right now. Get out where I can see you, or I'm calling the police." My voice came out louder than I expected, sharp with terror and fury. "I'm coming out. I'm coming out slowly. Please don't hit me. I'm not armed. I'm not dangerous." A man emerged from behind Harper's clothes, moving carefully with his hands raised above his head. He was thin, probably in his early 40s, with dark, messy hair that looked like it hadn't been washed in weeks and a scraggly beard. His clothes were dirty, a worn flannel shirt over a stained t-shirt and jeans that had seen better days. His eyes were bloodshot and red-rimmed, and he looked absolutely terrified, more scared than I was, which somehow made the whole situation even more surreal. "How long have you been in my house?" I demanded, trying to keep my voice steady even though I was shaking from head to toe. "How long have you been watching us?" He kept his hands up, his whole body trembling. "About 3 weeks. Since right after you moved in." "I'm so sorry. The house was empty for months before you came. I found a way in through the basement window, and I just needed somewhere warm to sleep. I didn't know anyone was going to move in. When you showed up with your daughter, I should have left. I know I should have, but I panicked. I had nowhere else to go, and it was getting so cold at night. 3 weeks. This stranger had been living in my house, hiding in my attic and my daughter's closet, for 3 entire weeks. I felt like I might throw up. "You've been in the attic," I said, my mind racing through all the implications. "That's where the sounds were coming from, and the basement. You've been all over my house." He nodded miserably, still keeping his hands raised. "And sometimes the crawl space behind the water heater. I tried so hard to stay hidden. I only came out at night when you were asleep to get food and water. I never wanted anyone to know I was here, especially not your little girl. She's so sweet. She saw me a couple times when I was getting water from the kitchen, but she wasn't afraid of me. She thought I was like a helper or a friendly ghost or something. I told her not to tell you because I didn't want to scare you. My hands tightened on the bat. This man had been interacting with Harper, talking to her, and my daughter had kept it secret because he'd asked her to. Every protective instinct I had was screaming at me to hit him, to hurt him for putting my child in danger. But looking at him standing there with his hands up, shaking and crying, I saw something that cut through my rage. He looked sick, genuinely ill. His eyes had that unfocused quality I'd seen in patients experiencing mental health crises. His hands shook with more than just fear. He was malnourished, possibly dehydrated, definitely suffering from something beyond just homelessness. My nurse training kicked in despite my terror. "What's your name?" I asked, the bat still raised but my voice slightly less harsh. "Marcus. Marcus Webb. I swear to you I'm not a bad person. I just lost everything. I lost my job 2 years ago. Then I lost my apartment, and I've been on the streets for months. When I found this house empty, it felt like a miracle. Somewhere warm, somewhere safe. I was only going to stay a few days, but then winter started coming, and I just couldn't face sleeping outside anymore." I stared at this man, Marcus, who'd been living in my house like a terrified animal. Part of me wanted to call the police immediately and have him arrested for breaking and entering, for trespassing, for stalking, for everything he'd done. But another part of me, the part that had spent years as an ER nurse seeing people at their absolute lowest, recognized the desperation in his eyes. I made a decision that would determine everything that happened next. I kept the bat raised but pulled out my phone with my other hand. "Marcus, what you did is illegal. You broke into my house. You've been watching me and my daughter. You scared us. I'm calling the police because that's what has to happen. But I'm also going to tell them that you need help, not just jail. Do you understand?" Marcus's eyes filled with tears, and he actually collapsed to his knees on Harper's floor, his hands still up. "Thank you. Thank you. I know I deserve jail. I know what I did was wrong. I just got so desperate and so confused, and I couldn't think straight anymore. Thank you for not just hurting me. Thank you for calling someone who might help." I dialed 911 with shaking fingers, keeping my eyes locked on Marcus the entire time. He stayed on his knees against Harper's wall, making himself as small and non-threatening as possible. When the dispatcher answered, I forced myself to speak clearly. "My name is Nina Westbrook. I'm at 847 Maple Street. I just found a man hiding in my 5-year-old daughter's closet. He says his name is Marcus Webb, and he's been living in my house without my knowledge for 3 weeks. He's not being aggressive right now, but I need police here immediately." The dispatcher's voice became urgent, asking if I was safe, if I could get to a secure location, if the man was armed. I answered all her questions, while Marcus stayed perfectly still, tears running down his face into his beard. "Officers are on the way. They'll be there in under 5 minutes. Stay on the line with me." Those 5 minutes felt like hours. I stood in Harper's doorway with the bat raised, Marcus on his knees in the room, neither of us moving or speaking. I could hear Harper's voice from my bedroom talking to Renee on the tablet. My sister's panicked voice came, through faintly, asking what was happening, saying she was getting in her car right now. When I finally heard sirens approaching, relief flooded through me so intensely my knees almost gave out. Blue and red lights flashed through Harper's window. Car doors slammed. Heavy footsteps ran up my front walkway. I called out, "The front door is unlocked. We're upstairs." 2 officers rushed up the stairs, a woman and a man, both with their hands on their weapons. Officer Kim Santos took one look at the situation and immediately took control, asking Marcus to lie face down on the floor with his hands behind his back. He complied without resistance, and within seconds he was handcuffed. Only then did I finally lower the bat, my arms shaking from holding it up for so long. Officer Santos turned to me with a kind but serious expression. "Ms. Westbrook, are you hurt? Is your daughter okay?" I nodded, unable to speak, and pointed down the hall to my bedroom where Harper was locked inside. The male officer went to check on her, while Officer Santos began asking me questions about what happened, how long I'd suspected someone was in the house, what Harper had said. Marcus was led downstairs in handcuffs, and I heard more sirens arriving outside. My sister Renee burst through the front door and ran upstairs, and I finally broke down completely, sobbing in her arms while she held me and whispered that everything was going to be okay now. Officer Santos asked me to walk through the entire house with her and show her everywhere Marcus might have been hiding or living. My legs felt like they might give out, but I forced myself to move. We started with Harper's closet, where Officer Santos photographed everything with her phone, documenting the blanket Marcus had wadded up in the back corner behind the clothes, the water bottle he'd been using, the granola bar wrapper he'd apparently forgotten to take with him when he hid. Then we went to the attic. I pulled down the ladder in the hallway, something I'd only done once since we moved in to store some boxes, and Officer Santos climbed up first with her flashlight. I heard her pause, heard her take a sharp breath, and then her voice called down to me with a grim tone I recognized from my own work in emergency medicine. "Ms. Westbrook, you need to see this." I climbed up the ladder, and my stomach turned. Marcus had turned a section of the attic into a living space. There were blankets I recognized from my linen closet arranged into a nest-like bed. Empty food containers were stacked neatly in one corner, things from my pantry, granola bars and crackers and peanut butter jars, all carefully cleaned and organized. He'd taken the pillow from my guest bedroom. Some of Harper's picture books that I'd thought she'd lost were up here, apparently so Marcus had something to read. A flashlight I'd been looking for sat on a wooden beam, but what made me actually gasp out loud was the vent in the attic floor. Officer Santos pointed her flashlight at it, and I saw that it looked directly down into Harper's bedroom. From this position, Marcus would have had a clear view of Harper's entire room, her bed, her toy box, her desk, everything. He could see everything from up here, I whispered, feeling bile rise in my throat. He was watching her sleep. Officer Santos put a steadying hand on my shoulder. He had access to observe your entire routine. When you came home, when you left, when your daughter was alone in her room. This is extremely serious, Ms. Westbrook. What he did goes beyond simple trespassing. We climbed back down, and Officer Santos asked to see the basement. I led her down the narrow stairs to the unfinished basement where I kept the washer and dryer. She immediately spotted the window Marcus had mentioned, a small window near the ceiling that I'd never paid attention to. The lock was broken, clearly forced open from the outside. "This is how he got in initially," Officer Santos said, taking more photos. "We'll need to get this secured immediately." By the time we came back upstairs, Marcus was sitting on my couch in handcuffs with the other officer standing over him. He was talking, words spilling out of him like he couldn't hold them back anymore. Officer Santos sat down across from him, and I stood in the doorway, listening as Marcus explained everything. He'd been a software developer until 2 years ago, when he'd had what he called a breakdown. Depression and anxiety had spiraled into something worse, something that made it impossible for him to work or function. He'd lost his job, couldn't pay rent, and ended up on the streets. The shelters were too crowded, too overwhelming for his deteriorating mental state. When he'd found my house empty in October, he'd broken in through that basement window and made himself a hiding spot in the attic. He'd been there for a week, thinking the house was abandoned when Harper and I moved in. "I should have left the second I heard you moving in," Marcus said, his voice breaking, "but I was so scared of going back to the cold. I convinced myself I could just stay hidden, just for a little while longer, just until I figured out where to go next. But your daughter saw me getting water one night, and she wasn't scared. She asked who I was, and I panicked and said I was the house helper. She started calling me the quiet man and leaving snacks for me in places where you wouldn't notice. And the awful truth is, living here, hearing you two laugh together, watching you be a family, even though I knew it was wrong, it made me remember what having a home felt like. It made me feel less alone." Officer Santos told Marcus he'd be taken to the county hospital for a psychiatric evaluation before being formally processed. She explained to me that he'd broken multiple laws, breaking and entering, criminal trespassing, potentially stalking charges depending on what the district attorney decided. But given his obvious mental health crisis, they'd recommend evaluation and treatment alongside any criminal proceedings. After Marcus was taken away in another police car, Officer Santos stayed to finish her report. My sister Renee had gotten Harper out of my bedroom and was sitting with her downstairs, trying to distract her with videos on the tablet. Officer Santos sat down with me at my kitchen table and spoke gently, but directly. "Ms. Westbrook, I need you to understand something. This man had extensive access to your home and your routines. He knew when you were vulnerable. The fact that he didn't physically harm you or your daughter is fortunate, but that doesn't mean he wasn't dangerous. People experiencing mental health crises can be unpredictable. You and your daughter are incredibly lucky." I nodded, tears streaming down my face. I missed every sign. Harper kept telling me about the quiet man, and I thought it was her imagination. I heard noises and convinced myself it was the house. Food disappeared, and I blamed it on not paying attention. How did I miss all of it? Officer Santos's expression softened. "Because you're a working mother doing your best to hold everything together after a divorce. You were exhausted and overwhelmed, and your brain did what brains do. It looked for the simplest explanation for everything. You're not to blame for his choices." After everyone left, after I'd given my full statement, and Officer Santos had handed me a card with victim services information, I sat Harper down to explain what had happened. I kept it simple and age-appropriate, telling her that the quiet man was real, but that he shouldn't have been in our house, that even though he didn't mean to scare us, what he did was wrong. Harper listened with wide eyes and then asked the question that broke my heart. "Is he going to be okay, Mommy?" He seemed really, really sad. I pulled her close and kissed the top of her head. "The doctors are going to try to help him, baby. But right now, we need to focus on making sure we're okay. And we are. We're safe now." Harper and I didn't sleep in that house again for over a week. We packed bags that same night and went to stay with Renee while I tried to process what had happened and figure out what to do next. Renee's guest room became our temporary refuge, while I had every lock in the house changed, the basement window repaired and secured with bars, and a full security system installed with cameras on every entrance. I had a professional come inspect the entire property to make sure there were no other access points someone could use. The bill was more than I could really afford, but I didn't care. I needed to know my daughter would be safe. Todd was furious when I told him what happened, and we had one of our worst fights since the divorce. He wanted me to break the lease immediately and move somewhere else, somewhere safer, but I refused to let fear drive me out of the home I'd worked so hard to afford. We screamed at each other over the phone about responsibility and safety, and whether I was fit to have primary custody if I couldn't even tell someone was living in our house. His words cut deep because part of me agreed with him. What kind of mother misses signs that obvious? Harper started having nightmares about the quiet man, waking up crying and asking if he was back in her closet. I took her to a child therapist who specialized in trauma, and slowly, over weeks and months, the nightmares became less frequent. The therapist told me that children are remarkably resilient, that Harper would process this and move forward as long as I remained calm and consistent and didn't let my own fear consume me. Through Officer Santos, I learned what happened to Marcus. He was held on a 72-hour psychiatric hold at the county hospital, which was then extended to 30 days when doctors determined he was a danger to himself. He was diagnosed with major depressive disorder, severe anxiety, and early-stage schizophrenia that had gone completely untreated for years. The district attorney's office decided not to pursue criminal charges on the condition that Marcus complete a mandatory long-term treatment program and enter supervised housing for homeless individuals with serious mental illness. He'd never have contact with us again, they assured me, and there would be a permanent restraining order in place. I never saw Marcus again, but about 6 months later, I received a letter forwarded through the police department. It was from him, written from a group home where he was living under supervision. The handwriting was shaky but legible. "Dear Ms. Westbrook, I don't expect you to forgive me for what I did. I know it was wrong. Being in treatment has helped me see how distorted my thinking had become, how I convinced myself that hiding in your home wasn't really hurting anyone. I was wrong, and I'm deeply sorry. I violated your safety and your daughter's safety in ways I can never take back. Please tell Harper I'm sorry for confusing her and scaring her. She showed me kindness when she didn't have to, and I'll carry that with me always. I hope you and your daughter are safe and happy now. You both deserve peace. Marcus. I read that letter 3 times, crying harder each time. Then I folded it carefully and put it in a drawer. I didn't respond because I didn't know what to say, but I also couldn't throw it away. It felt important somehow. Proof that Marcus was human, not a monster, even though what he'd done was inexcusable. The whole experience changed me in ways I'm still discovering. I'd always prided myself on being tough and independent, on not needing help from anyone, on being able to handle single motherhood without breaking down. But having Marcus in my house for weeks, without realizing it, shattered that self-image completely. I started therapy to process the violation and the fear, and my therapist helped me understand that my determination to prove I didn't need anyone after the divorce had actually made me more vulnerable. I'd been so focused on appearing strong that I'd ignored every instinct telling me something was wrong. I also started volunteering with a homeless outreach program in Portland, working specifically with their mental health crisis team. I couldn't help Marcus directly, but I could help people like him before they got desperate enough to break into someone's attic. I learned about the gaps in our mental health system, about how people fall through crack after crack until they end up on the streets with nowhere to turn. It didn't excuse what Marcus did, but it helped me understand the context of his choices. Harper recovered faster than I did, the way children often do. After a few months of therapy and consistent routines, she stopped talking about the quiet man and went back to normal 5-year-old concerns, like whether mermaids were real and when she could get a pet rabbit. But she did develop one lasting habit that we still do now, over a year later. Every single night before bed, Harper and I check her closet together. We open the door wide, look inside, confirm that it's just my clothes and shoes, Mommy, nothing else, and then close it firmly. It's our ritual, our way of reclaiming that space and that sense of safety. My relationship with Todd actually improved after everything happened. He apologized for some of the harsh things he'd said, admitted that anyone could have missed the signs, and acknowledged that homelessness and mental illness can turn people into versions of themselves they never intended to become. We developed a better co-parenting rhythm, united by the shared goal of keeping Harper safe and helping her heal. The most important lesson I learned is about the difference between strength and stubbornness. Real strength isn't refusing to ask for help or dismissing your own instincts to prove you can handle everything alone. Real strength is trusting yourself when something feels wrong, reaching out when you need support, and accepting that you can't control everything no matter how hard you try. I also learned to listen to Harper. When children tell you something is wrong, even if it sounds impossible or imaginary, there's usually a reason they're saying it. Dismissing her stories about the quiet man as imagination had put us both in serious danger. Now, when she tells me something that seems unlikely, I take the time to investigate rather than immediately explaining it away. I think about that midnight phone call all the time. Harper's giggling voice saying, "The man in my closet says hi," like it was completely normal. How I thought for those first few seconds that she was just playing pretend, testing boundaries, being silly. How close we came to something so much worse than what actually happened. What if Marcus's mental illness had manifested as violence instead of fear? What if he'd hurt Harper when she discovered him? What if she'd tried to keep his presence a secret more actively and he'd manipulated her into helping him? The what-ifs still wake me up some nights, my heart racing, checking the security system app on my phone to make sure all the sensors show green, all the doors and windows secure. But I also think about the broader failure that led to Marcus being in my attic in the first place. A man with a good job and a stable life, brought down by mental illness, with no adequate safety net to catch him before he fell so far that living in a stranger's attic seemed like his only option. That's not just a personal tragedy. That's a systemic failure that affects thousands of people. I don't excuse what Marcus did. He violated our home, watched my daughter through a vent in the attic, took our food, and shattered our sense of safety. Those facts don't change no matter how much I understand his desperation or his illness. But I also can't demonize him. He was a sick person making terrible choices, not an evil person choosing to do harm. And now he's getting treatment and support that might prevent him from ever getting that desperate again. 10 minutes was all it took from Harper's phone call to me opening that closet door and finding Marcus hiding behind the clothes. 10 minutes where my world shifted from dismissing my daughter's imagination to confronting the reality that we'd been living with a stranger who'd been watching us for weeks. Those 10 minutes taught me that the most dangerous threats aren't always the ones we imagine. Sometimes they're the ones we refuse to believe are real, because believing them would mean admitting we're not as in control as we thought we were. Harper is 7 now, thriving in 2nd grade, still occasionally mentioning the quiet man as that time when the sad man lived in our house, with the matter-of-fact tone children use for events they've processed and moved past. We live in a different house now, one that's newer with better security, though I know that safety is as much about awareness as it is about locks and cameras. If this story gave you chills and made you think twice about those strange sounds in your house, please subscribe for more real stories about the unexpected dangers hiding in plain sight and the resilience it takes to recover from them. And drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from, because I love connecting with you all. And if your child ever tells you about something or someone that seems imaginary, please take the time to really listen and investigate. It might not be imagination at all. Trust your instincts, trust your children, and never convince yourself that something can't be happening just because it seems impossible.